So a couple things. I'm trying a different microphone. It's the microphone that's embedded on my laptop. So I'm hoping that the sound comes out clearer. And for some reason, that embedded microphone has a lot more features in terms of boosting the microphone and having higher levels, et cetera, et cetera. I've noticed that the microphone on my webcam is a little bit kind of soft, and I don't know why that is. I've looked into the features that it offers, and it doesn't really give you a good good control over the microphone. It's like, either it's on or it's off, blah blah blah. And you can play with the levels on whatever degree you want, but it doesn't. You can't boost it. So anyway, so that's one thing. And the other thing I've been having is these kinds of I don't know what causes it. I've read some things about bipolar, and I don't know how true it is, because everything I've read since like years ago in terms of bipolar and memory loss is always kind of circumspect, and there's no real solid information on it. So apparently during manic episodes or depressed episodes or hypomania episodes, you will have memory loss, but it never really drills down into like basically when you're feeling optimal or when your state is optimal, if memory loss kind of intrudes in that area as well, or how long lasting these memory loss things are. I mean, it's really difficult to say. So I don't know. But I do have this thing where I have really bad memory. So I don't know how those things connect. I could read about it. I could, think about what happens to me, blah, blah, blah. But I don't know how well this is connected. I know on some days I can read 10 news articles and kind of remember each one almost, as much as anybody would have to remember a news article to carry on a conversation about it. And then other days I would read 10 news articles or 2 articles and just totally draw a blank when it comes to recalling what I read. But the evidence is there. I mean, I read them. I never post things on my site that I haven't read. Some people do. Some people read the headlines and post stuff, but I never do that. I read the whole article and then post stuff. So anyway, if anything, Spiralvent is, and these videos especially, is basically, I think maybe a log of basically, I don't know what, but my struggles with bipolar. I have no idea. But I think I've been consistent so far. I mean, I do look at some of my old videos and I do see a consistency. I don't see anything except for my haircut and, my beard maybe. But I do see a consistency in terms of what I'm saying and how I'm saying it. So who knows? Anyway, so that's up in the air, and that's basically a little bit of housekeeping. I just listened to the latest Sam Harris podcast with Jonathan Haidt, and they were talking about to a certain extent, echo chambers and mob mentality and you name it, the whole gamut of groupthink, things like that. And I just want to reiterate that these things are really important, but I don't think it just leaves off at, well, this is an echo chamber or this is what groupthink is. I think you kind of have to realize, I mean, depending on how far you want to look into this stuff, I mean, you kind of look at, say, something like mob mentality, and they discuss this. I mean, it wasn't like the conversation was lacking, but I do think there is a certain amount of intelligence that's sacrificed when you get into things like echo chambers and mob mentality, especially mob mentality and things like that. I've read numerous articles saying that, intelligence doesn't just go down. Intelligence goes down to the point where actors within the mob do things that are counteractive to the benefits of the mob. So you do things that are actually harmful to the citizenry of the mob itself. So you get into situations where you're it's I guess it's in a certain way it's suicidal. I don't know, not to the detriment. I sound like a postmodern writer, but it's suicidal in the sense of just doing stupid things. And I'm sure it actually kind of maybe gets to that point, violence and attacking people, and maybe not even suicidal but murderous. But that's mob mentality. But I mean, what they were talking about in terms of postmodernism and the left and the way people are just outrage culture and being offended all the time. Like, I mean, that does actually happen. Maybe not all the time to the point of violence, but I mean, it does get into the administration of certain institutions, and it gets into disciplinary actions that are kind of just, public public relations kind of messes. Lindsay Shepherd, right? That's the biggest Canadian one I know. But they did mention that, by the time people get out of university and stuff, I mean, this kind of thinking is ingrained in them, and it happens outside of the university as well, and even before pre-university, apparently, because they were talking about the iGen generation, or Generation Z, and yeah, I'm a firm believer. Don't ask me how I know. I'm a firm believer that this stuff it trickles out of the elite institutions and the elitists, and it goes all the way down to basically child rearing. And I believe that this actually does get into the mix of society in a very real, sort of visceral way. So that's my take on that. Nothing too original. I'm not deviating too much from the podcast, but that does happen. I mean, it's more than just eating vegetables, right? So anyway, that's my take on that. I have nothing really much else to say. There was some other stuff I want to talk about too. Free will. I read an Atlantic article the other day about free will. And yeah, I mean, there is, you see, the thing is, when you mention free will or determinism, to a certain extent, you get kind of stuck because it's not what you feel. So there's a disconnect right away. You're not feeling determinism. And this goes back to Sam Harris's whole take, a puppet, doesn't feel a lack of free will, because it loves its strings, et cetera, et cetera. So it's an argument that's highly intellectual. I mean, we're not evolved to feel determinism or feel free will. And for a lot of people, feelings are very, very powerful things. In fact, feelings wins their arguments sometimes. So I can tell my camera is kind of shaking up right now. So we might end up with some choppy video. Okay, well, I'll watch this video and see how it turned out. So yeah, we're not evolved to think of determinism and free will in any sort of natural way, or that comes intuitively when we're discussing things or acting in certain ways. So our argument is kind of lost in the throes of what happens every day and on a second by second basis. So I mean, that's pretty much where it is, and I do think that change. It's like antinatalism. If you watch my last video on antinatalism, it's not something that's going to come about very easily. I mean, our entire civilization on pretty much every single continent of the earth is built on the feeling that people have volition, that people can be bad and good, et cetera, and yeah, I mean, that's not going to change anytime soon. I mean, I do imagine an era where people do understand determinism or the lack of free will, and what we end up with is just sort of like this recycling of everything. So it's kind of like we get to maybe, because the Atlantic article mentioned people doing studies about basically having people understand free will or lack thereof, and then understanding that there is free will, et cetera, and having in experimental conditions, making choices that kind of reflect what they just read in terms of lacking of free will or having free will, et cetera. So these, but in any case, it's some sort of micro study. But I do understand that there might be a post-apocalyptic kind of era where people have understood determinism and free will and understand the differences between what those things mean, and we just start the cycle all over again. So we go back to basically revising laws and retributive or rehabilitative punishment, or and we just kind of revise the whole system. We just go in a whole cycle again, this time understanding that there are external factors to the way people behave and what they say and what they do, except that the laws may be slightly altered to bring about change. Like Sam Harris says, right, pulling the right levers, right? So that's the way I see that, and yeah, we'll have to watch. I might have to do this video again, so woe is me. But yeah, we'll see. Bye.